It's all about the game, and how you play it. All about control, and if you can take it. All about your debt, and if you can pay it. It's all about pain, and who's gonna make it? Time for the game. Time to play the game.
If there are 2 points I had hoped to make, and probably failed to make in my 2 videos on Joseph Campbell and the Monomyth, is that 1, story structure by itself is only as valuable as the person using it, and 2, no single type of story is better than any other kind. To think otherwise would diminish the actual joy of creating and experiencing fiction, boiling things down into algorithms and determining a story's value ahead of time. And yet we still often find ourselves giving credit to certain types of storytelling and proclaiming them better than any other type. It's not uncommon to hear on the internet that television shows that follow a serial format, especially if those shows are dark and gritty and complex, are superior to shows that are episodic, like sitcoms and Saturday morning cartoons and such. In Doctor Who fandom, this is typically called the gun versus frock debate. In that context, it's a common fan debate as to if Doctor Who is better when it's taking a story seriously and allowing for realistic violence and conflict, a gun, or if it's better when it's totally goofing off and being a silly family show, a frock. It's all pretty stupid if you ask me. There's value in every kind of story, and each story should be judged on its individual basis, not by how you can categorize it. I bring this up because Reboot is a rare beast that gradually changed its structure as it progressed, a change that echoed changes happening in children's media as a whole at the time. The series started very episodic, with each episode having little to no consequence on the episodes around them, and was overall very lighthearted. This was more or less the state of children's television entertainment throughout the 80s. Oh, sure, the show premiered in 1994, 2 years after Batman the Animated Series and a month before Gargoyles, the 2 poster children for serious children's entertainment. But you have to remember the concept of Reboot was conceived in the 80s and production began in 1990. It's really a show of an era past. But as the series progressed, it transformed itself into a serial-type show and took itself more seriously. The transition isn't sudden either, and when you finally realize it's happening, you're already well into it. In that respect, Reboot is an interesting historical artifact of a certain period of television storytelling, and shows how one work can take on multiple structures and still be identifiable with itself. This is the 3rd episode of the series, The Quick and the Fed, and it's the first episode in the show's episodic Saturday morning cartoon stage that's really good, presents the strengths of this style of storytelling, and sets the foundation for what the show would eventually become. We begin with our adventure in progress as Megabyte launches his latest toy, a big-ass cattle prod that'll blast down an entrance to the supercomputer, but thankfully Bob is there to thrust his cock into the scene and save the day. Everyone is acting all surprised that Bob showed up. Guys, you just stuck a giant yellow machine into the sky and used it to bend the sky. Did you honestly think that the one guy responsible for peace and order in Mainframe wouldn't have noticed? Did you think he wouldn't be able to fly through your open roof? I see we still have a little bit of idiot ball going around from last episode. Bob makes quick work of Megabyte's goons, disables the machine, and safely takes the magnet that was powering it. Now, what's interesting about the magnet is that, for all intents and purposes, this magnet is an actual physical magnet, which makes little sense in context. The world of Reboot is to visually realize and anthropomorphize the normal functions of a computer, with the characters being different types of data, which are not actual physical things but electronic quantities. The magnet is entirely an artifact from the physical human world. There is no computer function that could possibly represent what this magnet is and does. To put that in perspective, imagine a show that took place in the normal world with no fantastical elements at all, and then one of the characters goes to a yard sale and buys the Iron Sulfur World Theory. Not a book or a paper or any physical object relating to the theory, but the concept itself, for 50 cents along with a private pizza action figure. Okay, this is getting a little long-winded, but let me be clear that I'm not actually addressing this as a negative to the episode. In order to understand Reboot's evolution, we need to understand its starting point in the realm of episodic Saturday morning cartoons, which tend to have a vocabulary unique to serial and serious. Now, you don't have to be a computer wizard to know that magnets can fuck up a computer pretty badly. That's relatively common knowledge. So while thinking it through reveals how little sense a magnet in Reboot makes, it still contains a level of symbolic weight. It's even a horseshoe magnet, a type of magnet with little real-life function outside of a classroom, but it's almost universally recognized as a magnet. This is a kind of symbolic shorthand, which is pretty much the bread and butter for the episodic Saturday morning cartoon. The further away a children's series gets from reality, the more reliant it is on symbols, and you really don't get any more unreal than Reboot. Literally everything on the screen is symbolic of something else. In that regard, the magnet is a most perfect fit, regardless if it makes any logical sense. What the story asked for was some kind of dangerous artifact, something that must be handled with utmost care and will harm our heroes should they make a mistake. This could have been anything, a crystal or a bit of generic sci-fi machinery, but instead they opted for the magnet because it is something that children recognize and therefore can attach themselves to, and something that is known to cause serious harm to computers in the real world, attaching the show to the real world. By being symbolic of real-world danger, it lends that danger to the episode, which makes the threat feel more real for the audience. Well, Bob decides the best thing to do with something symbolic of real danger is to take it into Dot's diner to show it off. Strike one. This causes a brief panic, but Bob tells everyone to calm down because he's got it in a box. Then he lets Enzo, a spastic child, play with his dangerous multi-tool glitch. Strike two. Enzo accidentally knocks the box off the counter, which pops open without any fuss because I guess it wasn't locked down or anything, and the magnet flies straight into Dot's face. Strike three, she's out of there. Dot's in a bad way. It's actually kind of disturbing seeing her flesh fade in and out, especially around the face with just floating eyeballs and teeth at times. Bob immediately runs to Fong for help and... Oh, fuck, are you serious? We're playing Pong! Dot is dying, you old fuck. I'm starting to think Fong is a sadomasochist. Look, he even keeps a binome in the Pong puck for no reason than to torture it.
Now that you have whumped me at my favorite game, you have proven yourself worthy of my vast knowledge and endless wisdom. What was the question?
Cripes, can we just have that war already so Dot can do your job? Fong tells Bob that in order to stabilize Dot's condition, she'll need to eat some really slow food. And then Fong has the gall to push Bob out the door and tell him to hurry. Okay, what's next on the agenda? A child has gotten himself stuck in the water refinement plant, and you need my keys to open it up before he slowly suffocates to death? Patience. Let us first play a little Pong. Bob learns of a place that specializes in slow food, Al's Wait and Eat, but it's on level 31, the slums of Mainframe. It's nice to flesh out Mainframe like this. It would have been really easy to make Mainframe into a uniform Pleasantville for Bob to protect, but simply introducing a rundown diner full of less than desirables gives the world a kind of a class structure. Much in the same way the magnet used real-world knowledge to imbue it with symbolic importance, so too do the patrons of Al's Wait and Eat. We have a binome with a beanie cap, a symbol of youth, a number 8 wearing a bowler hat, a symbol of antiquity, a number 7 showing characteristics of the xenomorph from Aliens, a Hollywood-type monster. In short, a lower class of undesirables, those too young, old, or dangerous to have a place among the middle class, that squeaky clean, white-collar, business-owning middle class represented by Dot and her diner, represented by the political power and entertainments at the expense of others of Fong and his insistence of playing Pong. And this all from a couple of background characters. This is both playing the strengths of the symbolic language of the episodic Saturday morning cartoon while laying down the groundwork for the show's eventual turn towards the serial and serious. Bob, an upper middle class program, is clearly out of his depth here.
This is an emergency! I need slow food to go! Fast!
Ha ha ha! That's a good one. Hear that, Al?
What?
Bob can do nothing but wait while his slow food is cooking. Meanwhile, Megabyte sends Hack and Slash to track down Bob and try to reclaim the magnet. This is when we learn that Megabyte has some kind of a criminal influence over level 31, and places like Al's Wait and Eat are forced to pay protection money. You know, for being the hero, the central character of the series, Bob kinda sucks at his job. He doesn't destroy viruses when he gets the chance. He's unable to realize that a mask with a timer on it might be a bomb. And now we're seeing just how uninvolved our so-called Guardian is with the day-to-day crime. Oh sure, if it's a tear or a big doomsday device, he'll get right on it. But some goons roughing up the lower class is just not on his radar. Bob is in his element when it's grand superhero adventuring. Consider the opening, when Bob slides in, strikes a Superman pose, and starts running through the motions of handling henchmen and stopping the evil scheme without really harming the central villain's person or resources. It's a typical episodic Saturday morning cartoon plot distilled into a couple of minutes. A lineage of shitty circular adventure shows like Masters of the Universe and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers compressed into 3 minutes and 7 seconds. As an episodic Saturday morning cartoon hero, anything outside of this, like, say, an accident in which the hero is at least partially responsible for, puts the hero's best friend in mortal danger, forces Bob to shed the machismo and face up to the fact that he's a total rookie who has no fucking idea what he's doing. If Bob doesn't know how to reverse the damage caused by a magnet, why does he take it to a crowded public space? Why does Bob keep going to Fong for advice despite Fong never really being all that helpful and is totally selfish to the point that it endangers other people's lives? If Bob's job is to mend and defend, as he says in the opening titles, then why does he seem unaware of all the criminal going-ons in the lower decks? Bob puts on the airs of a traditional cartoon hero, but in practice he's very untraditional and kind of inept. That doesn't make him a bad protagonist, no, but he's a sharp contrast to the type of show he's supposed to be leading. Bob takes advantage of this situation and agrees to run hack and slash off if he can just get some goddamn food already. He gets some and allows the goons to chase him back to the upper levels, just in time for a Gamecube to start lowering over the area. Bob needs to get into the Gamecube. He at least knows it's his job to make sure the area doesn't get nullified, but he'll need a cunning plan to make sure hack and slash don't follow him in there.
You aren't going to catch me before the game wall closes.
Oh, yeah? Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Because you stopped.
So, what does the Gamecube have for us this time? Skyrim, awesome! Now, the world of the game serves a couple of functions to the show, not the least of them giving our heroes different environments to play in. What's notable about game segments is that they're shown from a completely alien perspective from what a person playing a video game in real life would experience. This episode was released about a month before the Japanese release of the Sony PlayStation, but more important, this episode was in production as far back as 1990, a time before games really implemented cinematic elements. There wasn't a single video game that looked anything like this at the time. The user's probably playing something along the lines of Ultima 6, two-dimensional with a bird's-eye perspective and decent pixelated graphics. Of course, showing video games as they really were back then wouldn't be all that fun, and it makes sense in-universe to recontextualize these games this way. These games are not being presented from a player's point of view. We are not looking into Reboot through a computer screen. We are always viewing things from the personal view of computer programming, so games should also be personified that way. In a way, this stops being about video games and becomes a series where characters from one show accidentally fall into another show, in this case a generic fantasy setting. One last thing to remember is that our protagonists on the show are always playing the antagonists within the game world. In the most dynamic part of any episode, the status quo is shaken. Bob thinks he hears Dot crying for help in the big medieval castle, so it's a dragon race against the user to get there first. But this ain't no normal dragon.
Who's in there anyway?
It's just me, and Al's working on the fire-breathing part. What?
Bob eventually makes his way into the castle via magical teleport through a window because, get this, there was a time when the censors wouldn't allow cartoon characters to crash through windows. Bob ends up having to deal with an enemy skeleton, which makes me speculate. If not enough people are caught in the Gamecube to fill in all the enemy roles, does the game just fill in the empty spots itself? Because otherwise, why isn't this skeleton a binome or something? In any case, this is the best action scene Reboot did up to this point. The camera is a bit more dynamic than usual. The skeleton creature is a neat design. I love how you can see into its skull through its nose and stuff. And Bob's means of defeating it are pretty creative. It's almost a counterclaim to the idea of Bob being an insufficient hero, but we'll see how long that holds up. Bob makes his way up the tower, only to discover that the princess NPC for this game is Enzo, not Dot. But Dot is there, just as another night enemy for the user to fight. She's completely fine, no longer suffering the effects of the magnet. All the expectations we had from years of watching typical episodic Saturday morning cartoons are getting shaken up rather violently here. The hero is not who we thought he was, the damsel in distress is not who we thought it would be, and the dragon is actually two greasy fry cooks. Dot does most of the work in taking care of the user, and Enzo lands the final blow. Gotta wonder how the user is taking this. His mission in the game is probably to save the princess, and now the princess is fighting against him along with the other enemies. God damn it, Origin Systems, do I need to install another patch? The game ends, and Dot reveals that she knows Al personally and managed to get some food via VidWindow. You know, that means of transporting goods from the last episode that makes a delivery service in Mainframe completely pointless. You can actually hear Dot try to explain this to Bob earlier, but you probably missed it because you were caught up in Bob's story and couldn't bother yourself with those details either. This brings us to the end, and the only really weak part of the episode. Megabyte shows up and threatens to hurt Enzo if he doesn't get the magnet back. Bob, in a moment rather uncharacteristic for him, ends up throwing the magnet right into Megabyte's head, Enzo having suddenly vanished from the scenes. We'll get into this more in a later video, but since this magnet could potentially kill Megabyte, this rather goes against Bob's attitude towards reforming viruses instead of destroying them, the reason why Megabyte and Hexadecimal are even still alive. Obviously, Megabyte doesn't die from this, but now the bad guys have the magnet back and can get back to warping reality? Good job, Bob. The Quick and the Fed is the first really good episode for the series. I know I've rambled on like 100 different tangents here, but there's a point to it. The show functions with the vocabulary of a typical 80s episodic Saturday morning cartoon, things like the magnet offering a symbolic shorthand regardless of in-universe logic. However, this style is being used in ways unique to this type of show, constructing a three-dimensional world, giving us extremely flawed protagonists, and playing with our expectations. In short, laying down the groundwork for its eventual transition into serial and serious. The change in that style will be as simple as unfolding an origami animal and refolding it into something else. New form, but the same paper. And it's just damn entertaining on its own, even 20 years later.
You know, it's at times like this I feel extremely close to you.
I was gonna say the
and there's
same
something
thing.
I should tell you,
You
before
are
we
like my brother.
before we hit rock bottom.
What?
Oh, it's too late.